Hey guys. How to do dry fasting? How to do dry fasting? You see, we call it a dry fasting, but in reality, it is not a dry fasting. It is actually the real and biblical fasting. Why do I say this? Is because in our days today, we have got many kinds of fasting. There is what people call a wet fasting. A wet fasting is when you fast, but you drink water. Some of the people can even drink juice. And there's what they call a Daniel fasting. These things, beloveds, they are not fasting. They are not fasting. There is only one biblical fasting, and that is dry fasting, where you do not eat, you do not drink, and in some cases, you do not even bath. But I will go into such details. You see, the reason why many people have what they even call Daniel fasting. A Daniel fasting is whereby you only eat fruits and vegetables. But people are actually misquoting what Daniel was doing. When Daniel was abstaining from certain foods, eating vegetables and fruits, it was not because he was fasting. In those days, in the old days of the Old Testament, the Israelites or the Jews, they believed that abstaining from certain food is actually good because as certain food would be regarded as defiling food. It will be food that defiles them. So they would stay from food that they believed will defile them. So Daniel was also one of them. He believed that there are certain foods that are defiling. So he would abstain from certain food and not eat, only eat fruit or vegetables. But it does not mean that he was fasting. Although in that time, he would consecrate that time and be praying and devoting to God, but it was not a fasting. So we cannot call it a Daniel fasting because it is not a fasting. It is just what in our days they call it just a diet. But the real fasting, the dry fasting, you do not eat, you do not drink water, you do not drink anything at all. And you pray and study the word of God. And in some cases, you do not bath. That is why even in the Old Testament, whenever the people fasted, they would not bath until the day they complete the fasting. When Daniel fasted for 3 weeks as well, when he said he didn't eat, he did not drink any wine or anything, when he was actually fasting, not the time he was eating fruits and vegetables, when he was actually fasting for 3 weeks, he would not eat certain foods that will defile him. But at the same time, he would not bath. Many people actually, when they would fast in the Old Testament, they would even take upon themselves ashes. But this fasting where you do not bath, it is only good when you do it in a place where you are not seen by people. It can either a place in a mountain or in your home when you are fasting in your house where you are not going out. It is only your family that is aware that you are fasting. You cannot, I would advise that you will not bath because it is also a sign of humility. Although humility is the condition of the heart, but when it goes or tags along with fasting, it speaks volume. But in a state where you know that you will be going up and down or interacting with different kinds of people, in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse number 16, going down, it says that when you engage in that type of fasting, you must make sure that you bath and you anoint your head, you anoint your lips, so that people will not be aware that you are fasting. When you fast, number one, it is a secret. It is a secret between you and God in that time that you are giving God. It is not supposed to be known by people. Do not disclose it to people. You can disclose it to the people that you are living with, or rather the people that you know that they have spiritually grown, that they will not discuss such matters with other people. Then you can do that. If you are married, obviously you will need to speak with your spouse before you engage in that fasting. So whenever you engage in a fasting, just know that dry fasting is actually a recommended fasting because it is a true biblical fasting where you do not eat, you do not drink. In some cases, you do not, in the case where you're not interacting with people, you do not bath. But if you're interacting with people, you can bath and you should rather bath. So this is how you do or make dry fasting. In those times, how long should you do this fasting? You do it for days. Although if you are starting, you can do it for hours until you know that you have grown to that. And then you can start doing for days. But I would recommend that you start with days. Maybe one day if you're still growing, and then go on as you grow in the fasting because you grow for it. Your body starts to a point where it gets used to be channeled into a point where you starve it. But when you are in that moment, you should make sure that you dedicate more hours to pray, to study the word of God without any distraction, especially phones or any technology. Now, what I would recommend is that when you are engaging in a dry fasting, when you break, especially as a starter, when you break the fasting, do not break it with big meals. When I say big meals, I mean about tough meals. You start small, especially with warm food. You can break it with things like porridge or tea. This is what you should start with first before you actually eat actual food. Why it is good for you, because if you start with big meals, it might hurt you and it might actually be very dangerous for you. Start with warm foods that will warm up your intestines rather, and then you can now take in real food. So this is how you do real fasting, dry fasting. God bless you. Shalom.